IVM.
हाय यार, क्या चल रहा है आजकल?
I am not going to pander to this situation. बता दिया करो. Just give me a heads up. Just be
If
like
I
I
give you
am,
a heads up, how is this going to be a fun start?
so that I can at least think of something novel to say apart from, oh my God. Like, I feel like my reaction to everything is that in my thyroid voice.
Yes.
Speaking of which, you were talking about your Pornhub voice. You want to give our listeners a little preview?
No, so basically, I've been told that sometimes my voice gets a little too husky for people's liking, but I think my husky voice is also a great voice to have. Or should I have a squeaky voice? What should I do? Yeah, tell me.
I think you should just start with the episode.
I should just make kids content. I'm going to make content for kids now, so I'm going to do like multiple voices.
Kids don't like husky, horny voices. I'm just letting
It's not a
you know.
horny voice.
What else is a... Bro, you literally just said that your friends think you have an OnlyFans voice. An OnlyFans voice is a horny voice.
OnlyFans is not just a porn voice.
आपने और क्या किया OnlyFans पे? Look at
I've
the
never
smile
been
on Varun's
OnlyFans.
face.
I've never been on OnlyFans in my life.
Jhoote.
I have actually, I swear, never been on OnlyFans.
Just look at that smile.
Some
You
other
can't even
websites
say it
maybe,
with
but
a
not
straight
OnlyFans.
face.
Some other
Okay,
websites
cool,
maybe, not
cool.
OnlyFans.
Okay, what are we
But
talking
yes,
about today?
What happened this week? In latest AI news, have you seen the new GPT-4 demo?
No,
that
but I've
came
seen
out?
Enthu Cutlets tweet about it on Twitter. So I'm assuming it is the shit.
No, but it's scary how quickly it's evolving. I've kind of had a bit of this thing last episode saying, can everybody stop talking about how AI is part of a new feature they've added on? But just generally how GPT-4, I think like the overall piece is kind of evolving is interesting, because there was this whole demo piece where the guy draws a website out and takes a photo of it, and literally GPT is working on building that whole website up from scratch. So I think the question large is becoming, it's evolving so quickly and we're giving it access to all this information. I'm still calling Judgment Day. I'm still calling Terminator that we are getting ourselves into that situation. But I'm also seeing some very interesting use cases. I was talking to a founder friend of mine the other day. He's talking about how like things like legal are a great place to use OpenAI, right? Like, you know, you normally get a term sheet, get a contract, and you want to like can't make out head or tail because legal language is a certain way. You can honestly copy paste it onto it and say, can you just like drill down the primary points from this and what I should take away? And it's doing that for you in like an instant. So
Yeah.
I think it's not just creative people.
Yeah, I know, but Gokul Rajaram, who works at DoorDash, not works at, I think he's one of like the CX type people at DoorDash. He posted his tweet saying whether we're seeing the first wave of white collar workers being laid off as a result of AI, specifically as law firms adopt AI tools for document processing, literally what you said. They're starting to lay off paralegals, moving very fast. No white collar profession is safe. So I haven't seen any tangible applications of it in my, 6 kilometer radius, but I won't be surprised if this accelerates.
But like, for instance, we've been using this for a bunch of stuff which we do on YouTube, everything from a YouTube captions to what's the title really be, what's the ideal requirement for a thumbnail. We're using it like even basic stuff like that. I know that some of the teams I have are working using this almost as a way for them to get the captions ready, and they fine tune it a little bit. So it's a part of day-to-day usage for most people now. And on those lines, Google is introducing AI-powered features in Workspace, which makes sense considering what Microsoft's doing with OpenAI. So Google has to kind of do this.
Yeah.
So it's making writing easier for draft creation, editing features, etc. So yeah, Google has some catching up to do.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And what else happened? Lenskart is raising 500 million from the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, but it's a flat round, right?
Yeah, at their last valuation of $4.5 billion. Which is still a pretty steep valuation. But I know we guys are going to talk about this at a later point in time, but it's just the table stakes for being called a successful consumer brand have exponentially shot up over the past 2 to 3 years, especially with more scrutiny around the scalability and efficiency of all things quote unquote D2C. And Lenskart is the OG D2C play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they've done the full stack of private label, supply chain, own platform, and obviously own retail stores. So more on this later, but it's the largest round that's been raised this year, man, by specifically by a D2C brand. So interesting times there. I don't know if you saw this. It was quite sad. There was a Forbes report that accused the Zoho co-founder of divesting a chunk of his shares in the company and placing it with his sister and her husband without informing his wife or some like whatever. And then he posted this like exponentially long thread sort of contextualizing the situation. What was your takeaway from it without obviously, getting into semantics?
He's obviously spoke about the issues happening. He's going through, just like a personal separation from his wife, and there's all that happening, but kind of also shows, right? We always see one part of a founder's journey, what we don't necessarily talk about, what happens inside. So while not commenting on, while not commenting on what's happening, what might be the right story versus what might not, but what might be individual versions, I feel in many ways it also shows that there's a strain that comes with building a business, but also on the other flip side, there's also strain that comes from what's happening to you personally, which kind of comes this side as well. So sad to see. You never want these kind of things to kind of come out. You want them to be
So I have a quick question for you. What is your point of view on publications picking up content like this? And especially business publications, if this was on like pinkvilla.com, I would have been like, theek hai bro, vibes with the general characteristic of it. What's your take?
I think Forbes is still not. So if an Economic Times or a Financial Times carried it, then I would be like, why is it there? But I feel Forbes has anyway been playing in this slightly business lifestyle space or whatever. So I'm not surprised they carried it. Also for most of these, what you call publications, etc. This is, they want that clickbait. They want people to read the article. So all this stuff kind of comes in, at most times. So I'm not surprised. But I think the bigger part here is that you'd want these things to stay private. You'd want these things to not be a public spectacle.
It's not about it staying private. This is my pushback. Like, I think the difference in between below average journalism platform and someone who you should actually believe is what they choose to publish. And, obviously on one end of the spectrum, and I totally get it, right? Everyone has work to do. Everyone has money that they want to make. I feel like in Tracker and, stories like this and similar type of narratives that have come out are the kind of stories that also remind you what kind of journalism is. I don't want to say, abhorrent, but just appeals to like the lowest common basest, vilest parts of content consumption, specifically in the context of the ecosystem. So I always judge publications by the stories that they don't choose to publish. And I can bet you on my life, this story would have been on everyone's news desk. Like, this is not exclusive to Forbes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the choice of publishing this is, I find it highly questionable.
No, I agree. It's not something which, but again, journalism, like you said, has had a bit of a fall from grace in recent decades.
Yeah.
The more breaking, the more sensational is what really goes. What else is going on? The TCS CEO, Rajesh Gopinathan, he's quit. He's been replaced by an internal candidate. But I think the most interesting part here is he's the first TCS CEO to ever quit. So all ex-CEOs have either retired or moved on to larger roles or different roles. He's the first one to quit. So one interesting thing which I saw was the fact that he mentions that he has another idea that he's mulling and he doesn't necessarily want to work on that while sitting on the chair which he's on right now, which I think is a very, it's a nice way to kind of put it.
Adult way. Yeah.
It's an adult way, which you don't necessarily see. People always say, you're building it in stealth while you're still sitting on the chair that you're on. I thought this is a bit of a refreshing change in that sense. But as always, Tata has enough candidates internally.
I was going to say one other thing, which is I feel like this very like steadfast character first, type of outcome is a very Tata characteristic.
Yeah.
So it's so nice to have them as a company known to do the right thing and have that not just be, at the more brand level, but literally have that, across the personnel level at Tata.
Yeah. What else is going on? What is going on? MindGeek, the parent of Pornhub.
Your favorite site.
They're
site that makes you smile.
India में banned है सब.
Look at those dimples. Oh my God. VPN.
But the interesting part, Pornhub is getting acquired by a private equity firm called Ethical Capital Partners. Just the irony of that. Ethical Partners acquiring Pornhub.
And the CEO of this company is actually Varun Suchita in stealth mode. Ethical Capital Partners.
If I was the CEO of Ethical Capital Partners, I would not have to do any podcasts. I would not be doing anything. But
that is true.
Yes, but in the Pornhub, I don't know if you caught the documentary on Netflix. I saw a bit of it. And I think it's interesting to kind of trace the entire Pornhub journey and on what's been really happening behind the scenes. So if anybody hasn't caught that, it's an interesting insight into how that entire platform and even the industry works. Because they haven't just taken the porn is bad point of view. They've taken how that industry is and how all different sides. I think that's a great one to watch for deeper context. Speaking of podcasting, LinkedIn's looking to help foster the next generation of podcasting talent. They're launching LinkedIn Podcast Academy. They're
LinkedIn coming through strong. LinkedIn coming through strong.
I still don't understand what their podcast play is, to be honest, because from what they've been doing on the podcast space, they've literally just been getting, they're sponsoring shows and end-to-end making them part of what they're calling the LinkedIn Podcast Network. Just the brand colors, etc., all that stuff changes. And this learning piece, I guess, kind of adds into LinkedIn Learning, which is anyway a large part of what their focus is. I still don't understand what their larger play is. I mean, it's not really a platform integration. It's more like they're just like helping create a lot more content. That's been my only confusion with what their podcast focus is like.
But I feel like that's with a lot of things on LinkedIn right now, whether it's, courses or, the long form features that they have or the event features that they have. I feel like they're doing the right thing, right? You're testing a lot of features out. You're seeing what lands. I feel like they're trying to find their media mix at this point in time. So for example, that PDF Sara thing on LinkedIn is wild. You haven't really, and PDFs technically are, carousal equivalents on Instagram. But it's interesting how they're testing and trying out different feature and media mixes on LinkedIn. I don't know which one will land. I don't know if their live events piece took off or has seen significant traction. Would you know? I know you're connected to the teams.
So it comes across when let's say there's professional chat, etc. happening. But I feel what they're really doubling down is really focusing on building more people who are creating more professional content on LinkedIn, right? I think that's their biggest focus. And that's been the big scale point for them, is that people are just creating more and more. They're really investing time, effort. They're doing this entire campus creator program, which I'm part of the group helping support that. And they're really starting off at that level. You're starting off at campus level, saying, you're creating content for LinkedIn and kind of like looking at them as the future of the platform in that sense, the future creators of the platform. So that's where they're really doubling down. I think all the other features, they're just seeing how people use it. But I would say that has been their key focus.
Gotcha. And quickly through the remaining stories.
Yes.
Xiaomi's slow shift in India to premium smartphones helps Samsung steal its crown. What do you make of this, man? Real battle of, Xiaomi, Samsung. Though I just shared that tweet thread with you, the Reuters report, which suggests that Samsung has really overshot all other players in this in the smartphone segment.
Yeah. Xiaomi's anyway had a bit of a fall from grace in India, right? I mean, from really kind of scaling up. Your Jog is having a moment. Even he agrees. She agrees. Both are agreeing that they're both don't like Xiaomi, like Samsung in that sense. But I think they obviously need a rebranding, almost like a facelift to get that entire China focus off them. Although interestingly, if you actually go, some of the other products beyond phones seem to be popping up a lot more when you buy on Amazon, like home cameras, etc. Even like air purifiers. Xiaomi's one was the number one selling one out the other day. Considering Bombay's lovely air these days, was checking out air purifiers, and Xiaomi's one was top and selling out very quickly. So you have to keep waiting for stocks to come back. So maybe the home part could be interesting scaling point, but Samsung have always been super strong in India. So I think that's like it's not a surprising thing to see.
Yeah. SVB's financial files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection says it has $2.2 billion in liquidity. In case you missed last week's amazing episode where our Black Swan correspondent gave us a lot of gyan on all things SVB, check it out. Any follow-ups from you on this unending SVB saga?
Not really. I mean, Tech Bros on the All In podcast had a bit of a meltdown, and then another meltdown on this. But it's been interesting to see that. But I think the whole Credit Suisse thing has been, if I pronounce Credit Suisse right, has also been something to look at, right? The fact that it's not just happening in America. This is like the banking space all over has been this. And did you see Naval Ravikant's tweet on this?
What did he say?
Naval Ravikant tweeted basically saying this is why things like Bitcoin is the future.
Yeah. We discussed this in the last episode. Old man, aap bhool gaye.
Umar ho gaya. But in hindsight, the more I'm looking at this, the realization I've actually had is that he might not be fully off this. Because you always said that, crypto and Bitcoin, etc. are unstable. They're not robust yet. But what was supposed to be stable, which is the banking system, is not that robust anymore.
That's a thesis on which that white paper was written, which, Vidur mentioned in the last episode as well.
Yeah, and I think that the more I'm reading in about it, it makes sense that at some point we'll find a middle ground between where banking is failing and where crypto is not stable, and that might end up
And
becoming the future.
finally, there'll be a use case of Web3. Our last three quick couple of stories. Walmart invests 200 million in Indian mobile payments giant PhonePe. Go PhonePe. Are you a PhonePe fan?
PhonePe is my primary UPI platform, actually. I use PhonePe more than any other platforms. Although I'm trying to use CreditPay, which half the time says UPI is unstable for some reason. And I think it makes sense for Walmart to do this. PhonePe was anyway a part of Flipkart earlier. It was hived off and made into a separate company altogether. So makes sense for them to double down because it's doing really well. It's a fabulous platform.
Yes, Queen. And do you want to tell us about your best friend, your brother from another mother?
Yes. Final story. Honey Singh, on the occasion of his 40th birthday, I didn't realize Honey Singh is younger than me, revealed that a new Netflix documentary will be out later this year. So the interesting part about Honey Singh was that he was obviously the OG, kind of brought this whole space into like the limelight when he did. He was literally there. You could not be listening to Honey Singh's song, not have it around you, not him being part of every single thing. But he had a bit of a crash and burn scenario. So his story is definitely going to be interesting to watch. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's also produced by Guneet Monga, has always been on a roll, but this is like just won an Oscar, has always been this amazing producer, and you want to see more of these kind of pieces coming out from her production company. But yes, I'm definitely going to watch it. I don't know if you are. But what are we talking about this week? What are we talking about this week?
Because your recommendations are usually 100 on 100. Why don't you tell us what we're talking about this week, given you selected 3 of the 4 stories?
So we're talking about one, there was an interesting Fortune India article on the FMCG space. We've always spoken about the startups in this space, but this article really drilled down onto how everybody from a Unilever to a Nestle, etc., have kind of like really evolved through the pandemic and really become very digital first and all the stuff that they've done. So it's an interesting one. Take into some of the key points. There will be what we'll tap into. We're also getting into the D2C space and the churn that's happening there. And that is your story pick. So we're going to look at what's changed there and how some things which I think we predicted have been kind of happening. We're also talking about Reynolds with his massive sale of Mint Mobile to T-Mobile for $1.35 billion. And just generally talk about the whole like Ryan Reynolds phenomenon and what he's really been able to do across everything from aviation gin to this. And closing in on Mark Zuckerberg's amazingly really long essay on what he calls the meta year of efficiency. So we're going to pick up some points from that. And yes, that's what we're going to talk about this week. But before we do that, we shall give some time for our efficiency. So we will go for a break and be right back. Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are talking efficiencies. No, we are talking FMCG. I don't know if you got this Fortune India article. I mean, it just popped up on my LinkedIn feed and I was running through it, and it was interesting, which is they've spoken to everybody across the what you call the original FMCG giants, right? We always talk about the startups trying to disrupt the space, but Unilever, Nestle, ITC, you're talking Marico, and how they've really evolved through the pandemic, through this entire thing. The interesting part is that, the assumption was that the pandemic would really push all the new age brands really up and make them start challenging what were established players. But what kind of shows is that they've been able to really adapt and grow in a very different way. They've not tried to do this knee jerk, let's just quickly do something way, but they've doubled down on their distribution, which is very robust for them, but really go very digital, like launch a lot more digital first brands, which is what Unilever did, right? They launched 5 digital first beauty brands. They've got 25% of demand for Unilever's come from digital channels now. So it's really been interesting to see how they've evolved. First, like top level thoughts from you on this space, and then I'll pick up a few other points.
So I think a couple of things. One, which is unsurprising, and in the next story that we guys talk about, it'll come back as well. But the Indian consumer brand story is essentially a story of distribution, not marketing. Marketing obviously is one part of it, right? So finding the right positioning, so on and so forth is, and then obviously going out with the right narrative to consumers is one. I'm not saying it's not important, but you get the gist. The story is really built on the back of distribution. And if you look at the kind of, entrenchment that ITC, HUL have in, let's be honest, what runs consumer brands in India, which is Kirana stores, it's non-trivial. That shit is impossible to recreate, replicate. Everyone has tried. Meesho kind of tried with their, peer-to-peer selling. Then there was this whole sort of like narrative of literally not the figurative version of direct-to-consumer, but literally come and shop from my own website, this, that and the other. But no other company has been able to disrupt the kind of entrenchment that ITC and HUL have. And for me, the reason why I've also, like a bunch of companies have reached out to me to be like advisor or angel investor or whatever. The biggest thing that's held me back has been exactly this. You can solve for everything, but if you don't solve for distribution, the ability to create a delta is limited. And just last thing, and then we'll, get into sub points of the story, is we also discussed Lenskart in the introduction. Lenskart is an example of a company that has cracked distribution down to the T. They've also been able to afford to crack distribution because they, run on a 60, 70, I don't know what their margin structures are, but because most of it is private label, it's not a marketplace. You have the margins to be able to really invest in everything from retail to own site to, marketplace, so on and so forth. So those are my first quick couple of thoughts, but let's maybe pick up 2-3 double taps.
The Kirana store piece you spoke about is a good one, right? Because so Unilever has this B2B app called Shikhar. And Shikhar is something that actually, they launched before the pandemic. Yeah. And basically now they have more than 1 million retailers on it.
So this is like Udan's competitor.
Yeah, and the thing is, before the pandemic, it was tougher for them to get people to come onto it. But when the pandemic happened, they just like literally it shot up because suddenly
quick adoption.
It became a great way for your smaller stores, etc., to get Unilever products. So the pandemic really helped them really scale that whole piece out. And in a similar way, like it also pushed everybody else, like from your ITC, etc., to really kind of scale there. ITC is interesting. Also acquired a bunch of brands, right? They acquired Yoga Bar recently. There's Mother Sparsh as well. So I think for Unilever, it's been about the fact that let's kind of use this B2B pipeline. And so digitization is not necessarily just about, how do you build a D2C platform and sell to the consumers, but how am I doing B2B and selling to the stores? There was one quote which I'm trying to find in the article, but I thought it was very telling, is the fact that all, your smaller retailers or mom and pop shops don't necessarily have too much shelf space. So they end up putting all the established players on it. So if you're a startup and you want your thing to be on your product to be on shelf space, it's tougher for you to get onto that. And the other thought is, okay, why won't you go to like, let's say a Big Bazaar or go to like your Reliance Retail, etc. They're making their own, private label brands and putting it over there. So where do you really go if you want to go omni-channel? Because the only way for a D2C brand to become a larger brand is to go omni-channel. And I feel that is the most important point, right? Where does this go? I mean, do you open your own stores, but nobody's going to come to your store for only your product? I think that's the key problem that newer brands are facing.
And if you look at the manifestation of that, even from an online lens, right? Amazon's the same. The second they see any build up in any category, they'll be the first ones to launch a private label. Big Basket, the same. I wouldn't be surprised if Swiggy, Zomato and whatever it is that they're trying to do with Blinkit, I wouldn't be surprised if more and more of even these digital aggregators follow the same formula of like a DMart or any like modern trade store. So the problem with a lot of these quote unquote challenger insurgent brands is you get screwed online because it's just very tough to grow. And now, even with Instagram and Facebook really clamping down on customer acquisition, it's difficult to sort of wiggle your way out of it, right? And if you look at offline, literally the point that you made, you're screwed over there as well. What is there? Like, if you're building a D2C brand, how would you be thinking of problem solving for these things, which you think HUL, ITC can't do?
Tough one, right? Because I feel the solution is going to be a way to get into shelves. And you have to figure some tie-ups. It's about partnerships. I feel you got to have a distribution tie-up with, let's say, a certain kind of store or a retail presence in that sense. And I feel that's the only way, because what's also happened is that these brands, and I can get from the article as well, they've also invested in a lot of tech. It's not, again, at the back end. So warehousing, inventory management, distribution, sales, all of that is very tech driven. So they've really invested high into this, which a startup obviously can't invest as much as they do. So it's tricky. So you got to figure a way to tap into somebody else's distribution rather than try and create it yourself. I feel that's the only way. Or you're raising a massive amount of money and figuring a way for it to happen, which I don't think is the right way. You'll have to tap into someone's network, because just the tech part, right? I mean, there's this whole piece about how Unilever does this, that they actually have a library of perfumes and they have 3D machines which make prototypes and do virtual testing at the back end. It's like,
wow.
And their entire delivery to retailers is automated and through robotized fulfillment centers. And so they've really gone into that so deep. Can a new startup really build that at scale? It's going to take a lot, which is why I'm guessing some of the acquisitions that are happening make more sense now, the more you look at it, because these companies can invest at this scale. They're obviously using a lot of analytics and data. They're using a lot of tech to drive this. Or you do what Lenskart does. I think Lenskart is a great example you picked up. So say that, okay, there weren't as many established local players, apart from maybe Titan in that sense. And so we can really drill into that. But if you're playing in the same space like all of these do, then it's tough. Actually, even if you look at like a Tata's actually taken some time to try and figure out their own piece. And as of today, their acquisition of Bisleri might not be happening. So I feel Tata's the only one who hasn't evolved as quickly as the others have. But for everybody else, it seems like they've come out of this whole period far stronger rather than what everybody kept saying
was the insurgent challenger brands.
Yeah.
I think one last piece, at least at my end on this story, is each and every one of these companies has played the compounding game. And I think that's the larger question to answer over here, right? Which is most VCs, especially the newer chunk outside of, say Fireside or DSG or whoever else, most VCs have 5 to 7 year return cycles. Is that even enough of a period of time to look at investing in insurgent challenger brands? Or does the way and the modality of, the source of money, does that have to change for some of these brands to genuinely really start growing?
You build to get acquired.
Do you either build to get acquired or you just end up doing really dumb things? I'm sure you've also been in conversation with so many quote unquote challenger insurgent brands where you're just like, boss, who has asked you to have the world's worst ROAS? Like some of the ROASes that I've seen are out of whack. Right. And it is because whether you like
Explain
it or not,
there is
a pressure to grow.
People who don't know what ROAS is.
Return on ad spend. Also, sometimes you use return on spend. But you get the gist. Like, is the model of, burn, grow, and then figure out how your unit economics stack up. Is that even something that has that caused more chaos in the D2C space? And maybe that's what we talk about in the next story.
Yeah. And just the last one, I think the one last point which is there in the article which is interesting is that a lot of these brands are also acquiring very interesting regional brands, like really strong ones. So ITC acquired Sunrise, which is the spice brand. Dabur acquired Badshah Masala. So you had a lot of these kind of happening. And Reliance interestingly acquired Campa Cola, which is like an OG cola brand, right? So it's interesting. I think maybe that's the space for a lot of these brands. Are you going regional enough? Are you going like for me, a VS Money, if it grows into the way it can grow up, can be a great brand for anybody to acquire. Right? Very clear. Like I bought, and I'm like hardcore, like a South Indian pickle podi eater. And I bought the podis from, and they're really nice from VS Money. So I feel that could be an interesting space to tap into. You're tapping into a very specific niche or a regional need. And there you're not necessarily competing as broadly. But I feel that could be a smart call for many of these D2Cs. Speaking of D2C, you should go into the story we picked up on the churn.
Yes, Queen. Yes, Queen. So shout out to Mr. Deepak Shaidatpuri, who, obviously runs DSG Partners, which is known for their investments in all things D2C. He posted 2 tweets, which caught my eye. And essentially the summary of all of this is 2 things. Is D2C as explosive as it was, made out to be on day one? And second, can we do a quick, vibe check on what is happening in the Thrasios of India space? Because last year, if you remember when we guys were recording, literally every second day there'd be a new Thrasio type, right? And we'll obviously run through the laundry list of them. So 2 quick things that he had posted. One was obviously on what is happening with Thrasio. There's an Economic Times article on how there is a lot of churn happening in the quote-unquote Indian Thrasios where, there's talent churn, there's founder churn, there's business churn even. And the second part of this is he linked to this really interesting report by Elevation Capital, formerly known as SEF. And the TLDR of this report, which is titled Consumer Brand IPOs Post 2020, is if you genuinely want to build a CPG brand that has the capacity and the capability of IPOing, the threshold that you need to hit, the benchmark that you need to hit is $100 million of revenue at 15 to 20% plus EBITDA and growing at anywhere in the general vicinity of 25% year on year or more. which is not easy. Like you and I have seen what it's taken to build all sorts of brands. Getting to that number is, far from trivial. So with these two things in front of you, and you're welcome to pick and choose either one, right? Either the D2C threshold or your tippenny on Thrasio, and really where are any of those? Kick it off, man. What's your take?
So I think India is such a different market. The Thrasio thing, and we've spoken about this a lot, doesn't make sense. And you're trying to reinvent the wheel in a specific area where maybe the wheel doesn't want to be reinvented. Maybe the consumer doesn't need that piece at all. I think that's been the real question for me on the whole Thrasio piece, is this something which the Indian market really needs? And unless you're giving something, like I would ideally say that the Thrasio model is Unilever. Or the Thrasio model is maybe a Dabur or a Marico. Marico actually is an interesting example in that sense, right? Because they've done that. They've been able to get in a brand and kind of build it up. Like think of a Beardo, for example, right? Beardo has been this really strong brand, did that deal with Marico very early on, has really been able to grow. Their CEO is someone who went from Marico to becoming their CEO. Someone we worked with at Glitch very early on before he moved on to the Beardo portfolio. And that makes more sense for me, for a startup, than to go to someone who's starting this off as like a Thrasio model and doing it. And therein, I think, lies the bigger problem, is that does the Thrasio model give a new brand enough compared to what, let's say, a larger FMCG might? Because a larger FMCG might give you lesser initially in terms of money or whatever else. But in the long term, you'll build a far more robust business.
Yeah. And just to set some context for our listeners, right? There were 7 Thrasio quote unquotes that came up. There was something called Even Flow, whose name I've made fun of in the past. 10 Club, Powerhouse, Upscalio, Goat, Mensa, Global Bees, and these are just the 7 we know. I'm sure there are like a bunch of others that, didn't even make it to
Goat is not a Thrasio, right? Goat can't be called Thrasio.
No, Goat is that. Goat is a aggregator. Goat Goat bought Label Life. They bought, they recently were in the news for acquiring Chumbak. Which I think was the last time there was any news that even came out of any of these, quote unquote Thrasios. Even something like Mensa, and maybe I haven't been checking LinkedIn that often, but, Anand Narayanan usually posts a lot on LinkedIn. Like he's always hovering on my LinkedIn feed. He seems to have also, sort of like quietened down, and I haven't seen too many acquisitions happen in this space. In fact, I think a lot of the general aggression that a lot of these guys had, right? We're going to acquire 30 companies in a year. We're going to acquire 60 companies in a year. None of those benchmarks, at least from whatever I've read, and I could be wrong, have been met. And that goes back to the core of, what does it take to build a business? You can't have a business be 10% of Varun's time, right? And Varun could either be the founder of a business, or he could be, the CMO of a business. But you know what I mean? Like it can't be a side hustle for someone to build a brand. It's just not going to scale that way. And I think with a lot of these companies, who have made a shit ton of acquisitions, with these Thrasio companies who made a lot of acquisitions in the past 14, 15 odd months, jury's still out on if the companies that they've acquired, have they even gone somewhere or not? Have they seen the, promise of Thrasio, which was, better margins, better commissions, better EBITDA, better distribution, marketing? Have any of them really seen that play out? And I don't know if you remember, but when we'd spoken about this, the biggest thing that we had said was, it's very difficult to replace a founder from a founder-run company. It's easier to incubate a company, the examples that you gave, right? Marico, HUL, it's easier to incubate a company within a setup versus replace a founder who's built a company from ground up. And you know what I mean? Like totally get them out of the equation and get fresh talent in to build and run the show.
I think one of the interesting questions on that by Deepak
Shahadadpuri, yes.
I'm generally bad with last names. It was the question that in India, Thrasio has to be more sector focused. And I feel that's an interesting question, right? Is a sector focused Thrasio the right way to do it instead of just going general? Because then maybe the pieces you build in become a little more focused, and maybe you're giving something which maybe a larger player or a different kind of player might not be able to. So focused rather than generic. I feel that's an interesting point. I think there is some part of that which makes sense, but then depends on how much that sector will scale.
Yeah, for sure. One is sector, and to take an example, look at beauty, where everyone from Mamaearth to even Sugar for that matter have launched smaller brands within the overall portfolio, right? Like Mamaearth has Dermaco, and I think they recently made another launch. If you juxtapose that even to companies like Purple and Nykaa, and listeners, you really must go listen to some of our older conversations on the Thrasio piece, because I was very not bullish about any of them, like extremely bearish about all of them. Because, similar to what you said, it's easier for a Nykaa or a Purple or, Tata Click, Palette, whoever else. It's easier for them to build because they understand the category so much better. And not only do they understand the category, they already have demand channels for the category ready. Nykaa can find product market fit for any new brand it launches much faster than, some company nestled within Mensa sitting in some corner.
Yeah. And, somebody actually asked me this whole piece, right? He said that House of Brands is quite an old concept. Why is even making it a big deal? And he actually says that you have two ways to look at it. Either you are an operating business, and that's how you started, and you acquired brands over years and then became a holding company owning it. Or you're saying from day one, I'm raising money saying I'm going to keep acquiring brands. And I feel the playbooks are so different is what he says for both. And I feel that's an important point to pick up, because it's true. A Nykaa will function more like, let's say, a Unilever personal care section will. Then, let's say, a Mensa will, because on Mensa from day one, saying my job is to acquire, my whole build is to acquire brands, not to build a brand myself as well.
Yeah. And just last point on this, and then we can move on to hottie of the hour, Ryan Reynolds. I think one last point on this is the threshold for a successful D2C company has really, really, really shot up in the past 2 years. And it goes back to that TLDR of the Elevation report that I just read out, right? You need to be at $100 million of revenue. That's, 850 odd crores of revenue, 15 to 20% EBITDA. This is not easy to do and still yet be growing. So there seems to be some amount of maturity in the ecosystem also, where everyone, unlike, what happened in consumer tech, where consumer tech investments went on for 8 years only up until someone figured out ki boss aise nahi chalega, here are the thresholds that you need to get to. I feel like in D2C that maturity has happened very fast. It's going to take a whole other way of thinking to be able to make any of these numbers happen.
Agreed. And before we go to our next story, which is on the monumental rise and the founderness of Ryan Reynolds, we're going to take a break. Come back with Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast. This is Varun here with Suchita, and today we're talking about Ryan Reynolds and the fact that he sold Mint Mobile, the mobile company that he acquired some time back, and kind of has been able to really pump up and grow through his marketing geniusness. He sold it for $1.35 billion to T-Mobile, as they call it in the US. It's a great example of how he's really been able to build brands. Aviation Gin, and there are a few others that he's really. There's a football club, Wrexham. Yeah, I mean, who would have thought, considering what he started off with, 2 guys, a girl, and a pizza place.
Yep. And look at him now, married to a hottie who's besties with Taylor Swift. He has like 600 children now. How
you Swifties bring Taylor Swift into everything? This is not Taylor Swift's doing.
Her Eras tour has started, Varun. Her Eras tour has started. And today is going to be day 1. So there is general excitement amongst all Swifties. No, but let me ask you this, right? What are the lessons that you think creators, influencers, plus can take away from the likes of Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds? Because obviously they're making cash money through their franchises, right? Deadpool plus. I'm forgetting what all Dwayne Johnson is in. You'll know better. But what's your takeaway from their formula?
I think if you look at Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, they've done something which is different from how a lot of other, let's say, celebrities do this, right? Celebrities often feel that just through their celebrity power, people are going to buy the brand. And that in the US as well has failed badly for many celebrities. What these two, and especially Ryan Reynolds, has done is they've realized that, okay, I have the ability to reach a wide set of people. I'm known for a certain kind of stardom. There's a certain kind of, with Ryan Reynolds, a certain kind of humor which you get, right? It's a whole Deadpool-esque humor which you get. How do I use that to build the best form of marketing? So people are really gravitating towards this brand. So that happened with Aviation Gin, some of the best work and really like quick, response times on like the Peloton one, for instance, and a few others. On top of that, what he's also done, which is interesting, so Blake Lively also has a brand which now they cross promote each other, and she does like similar things like he does.
Yeah.
Right, and that's again a smart thing to do. You play off each other in that sense. And with Mint Mobile, it's almost like he speaks the same kind of language. Again, the advertising, the marketing is where he's really been able to build a brand up. He's not building it on saying, oh, I am associated with this, so it'll obviously do well. He's saying, no, I'm going to focus on the marketing. I'm giving it my distribution and I will scale it up. Like, I think Terramana Tequila growing with Dwayne Johnson is again a great case study, right? He did Instagram lives where he was just doing, I think, Terramana Tuesdays or Thursdays, one of those days. And he was just drinking Terramana with people on an Instagram live. Yeah. That gave it that level of reach and scale. Every single event he goes for, he's carrying a bottle with him. He's making people swig it. There was an Oscars video he put up, which is him and Emily Blunt getting ready together to go present. And they're drinking Terramana Tequila. And she's like, you should pay me for this, right? And I think that's the thing. You're not making it about, oh, look at me. I'm holding this brand, which is mine. So you have to buy it. Yeah. Saying, I'm having fun with this. I'm marketing it. And you build an infrastructure, right? Both these guys, I think it's interesting. These are two names. Also built companies which are marketing companies. So Dwayne Johnson has $7 Productions and $7 I think marketing or whatever it's called, the agency one, which focuses on building everything from his Under Armour brand to his energy drink to tequila. And Reynolds has Maximum Effort, which then he sold to a holding company, became its almost CCO in that sense, and really been able to kind of scale that up. Now he's building production studios in Canada. So you got to think of scale in a way that you're getting operators in. But again, you own distribution as a celebrity. You don't own the consumer.
Yeah. Taking off from what you just said, you also lean into things that you can do very well and you outsource shit which is way beyond your pay grade. And not to bring it back to another icon, Miss Kim Kardashian, but I genuinely love the way, they've sort of built that initial momentum around Skims and Kylie Cosmetics. Found the right partner to offload it to, right? So, for example, Kylie Cosmetics is now an Ulta brand, if I'm not mistaken. And Skims obviously is being built in partnership with this Swedish couple who are, more or less like the CEO operators of Skims as well as Good American Jeans and a few others. But basically, I love seeing the humility that some of these guys have, because I think the biggest mistake that, a lot of these celeb type brands make, which is why, I don't know if you remember, but we discussed Lady Gaga's makeup brand also, House Labs, which didn't go anywhere. Selena Gomez has Rare Beauty. Jury's still out on, what direction that'll land in. These guys have found the right, left-hand side of the brain that's needed to scale these businesses up and make them successful. And they haven't run away from the fact that their Instagram's not going to do it all. Like Skims, for example, has a very strong retail play, as does obviously Kylie Cosmetics, given that they've been acquired by a large retailer, as does Good American. So they're cognizant of the fact that it's going to take more than just a cool Instagram story to get them the ROI that they need.
Yeah. And again, you got to be able to get your hands dirty. And if you see that most of them are now balancing, all Hollywood celebrities talk about themselves as entrepreneurs who also act. And that's happening. You see that with Kevin Hart. You see that with, like I said, I think Kim Kardashian's almost like the one to talk about because of how she's done this. In India, I think the only person who's talking about it that way is Deepika Padukone. I don't think anybody else is talking about that. I think that's the interesting one to see, because
dude, she's a legend. I love how she is building her brand. And I also love that she has, I'm sure it affects her personally, but she has no shits to give about the trolls. Like, she doesn't let that crap pull her down. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you see some of these guys really pandering, saying, sorry, galti ho gayi, maaf kar do. Like, there's none of that. For her, it's like, boss, I'm here to, be an icon and just get out of my way.
Yeah. And lots for others to learn. And so just pushing pan masala ads out there. But once I become a celebrity, I shall decide what brand I shall have. But I am not a celebrity.
Yeah, by the way, two quick things that we should call out to. Jalasmi just posted on our chat. Deepika launched the turmeric sunscreen for 82 East with a Get Ready With Me Oscars. And I love what she did with SRK. Similar to what you mentioned that, Dwayne Johnson does, right? Like, there's a organic scenario and the product makes a nice cameo in that very organic scenario. DP has done a lot of that herself.
Well done. Well done indeed. I'm also the Shah Rukh Khan one was my favorite though. The Shah Rukh Khan video was that was too fun to watch. Yeah. Yes. But in other news, moving on beyond from one celebrity to a person who acts like he's a celebrity, but actually has enough money to be a celebrity. Mark Zuckerberg put up this interesting long essay, long as in very long essay on what he calls the Meta Year of Efficiency, where basically he spoke about how Meta is building the future of human connection, and then went into this long piece about basically TLDR is that he spoke about how they're going to focus on efficiency. They're obviously cutting a lot of jobs. He pretty much admitted that they'd gotten very bloated in recent times. Weirdly, metaverse does not show up more than I think once or twice in the entire long essay. It's a lot more about, okay, we've hired too many people who are non-tech people. We're going to go more flat now as an organization. And so it's a very long piece, but kind of shows that the
Somebody's
mighty get humbled.
Humble pie.
Exactly, right. Imagine that. After talking about metaverse, now it's about their year of efficiency.
But, this was bound to happen because in my opinion, it would have either been this or there would have been some internal coup to get him out of being the CEO of Meta. There was no chance there's too much money on the line, man. You can't piss away $10 billion on some pipeline of a dream or a vision. And if you just juxtapose it to the way Microsoft is run, by partnering with OpenAI on ChatGPT, it's one of the biggest, most ballsy bets for a CEO to make. So it's not like these other CEOs aren't making big ballsy bets. They're just doing it in a phased out way. You know what I mean? Where they're doing it in a way where you're able to manage shareholders, you're able to manage, team energies. You're also outsourcing things that are not core to your company in the form of investments, which is what, happened in the case of Microsoft and OpenAI. I think Zuckerberg has, in my opinion, somewhere realized that, it's either going to be he shuts his mouth, figures out ways in which he can appease the right people internally and externally, and ensure that his role as CEO of Meta is safeguarded. Because I don't know how long he would have had that gig had he pursued his pipeline dream of metaverse.
Yeah, and I think if you look at some of the other things he spoke about, right? He said we're focused on the long term. He's saying they have a new open source build system. It basically compiles builds faster, so engineers can spend more time on iterating than waiting. But I thought the most interesting part was he said that we're seeing this upfront now, although it's not like we're letting people go right away, is so that, we're giving you a bit of a timeline. We're also being more transparent, saying this is what's coming up. I know it's going to be tough in the months to come, but we didn't want this to be a scenario where we've done this and you said, you haven't spoken to us about this before. It's his way to show transparency. I still don't, there is no right way to do layoffs. There's no right way to downsize, but no one's done this. So it's interesting that he chose to even say this line. He's saying, that, we'll get through this, etc. But I'm telling you before rather than when I'm actually going to be doing the cuts.
And the reason for doing this is because Google was pummeled for the way they did their cuts. That was horrible, man. For a company that's generally known to be quite nice, just sending people an email in a very transactional way and not just people who worked with you for decades. So I think they would have read the room both in the case of Microsoft and in the case of Google, where things may not have been handled in the most kosher way possible and, taken a cue from there.
Yeah. And the last point, I think this line says it all, is profitability enables innovation, is what he said.
And the tides have turned. The tides have turned. Look at this. The little chhati has been...
And he also kept saying that we are a technology company. He kept reiterating that throughout. Metaverse came very little, but we are a technology company. Technology kept coming up again and again and again. But you're running a business. You have to make profits. We're back to the basics. It's unfortunate that cuts happen because of this, but this was bound to happen.
I have a quick question for you. How do you think this is going to play out in the Indian landscape? I am genuinely surprised and shocked that apart from maybe Swiggy, I haven't seen deep cuts in any of the massively, let's be honest, overfunded and overstaffed.
ShareChat.
Yeah, ShareChat was 30% layoff.
And they've done 3 rounds of layoffs, by the way. The last one is what people spoke about, but they've actually done 3 rounds of layoffs in the last 3 to 4 months.
But I'm surprised I haven't seen this in, a Paytm or a Zomato, and not for any other reason. I feel like it's, when everyone is laying off is actually the best time to lay off, right? Because then no one talks about your own unique layoff case.
Or are they doing it in a slightly more phased out manner where it's not big news? I have a feeling it would be quieter. Maybe they're not hiring as much. They're taking off. What everyone's done is they've stopped adding too many newer projects and they're letting go of the fluff projects, right? I think that's the first thing that went out. But again, it's true. It hasn't been as out there, but I'm sure they're all cutting back.
Aggressively.
Yes. On that note, we shall go for our final break and come back with this week's recommendations. Welcome back to Think Fast, where Suchita will first tell us what her recommendation is because she's ready.
As I do every single episode. But in any case, while you scratch your head, guys, in the effort of, paying homage to Taylor Swift yet again in the episode because her Eras tour has begun, this guy whose newsletter I really like called Rex Woodbury, he has one out called What Taylor Swift Can Teach Us About Business, from viral marketing to market sizing to product roadmaps. Honestly, man, even if you don't give a shit about Taylor Swift, but you enjoy all things marketing, great read and great sort of bifurcation into how Taylor Swift has really transcended audiences and generations, which is the toughest to do. You know what I mean? How do you speak to boomers and millennials and Gen Z at the same time as the same person? And also, how do you adapt to new mediums like TikTok? So please go give this a read if you enjoy marketing.
My recommendation is actually, I loved the entire season of Last of Us. It's just finally seeing a video game made into a show or a movie in that sense, which really tries to not dig into the action, but dig into the story. And it's just beautiful, just the way they made the show. My recommendation actually, more than the show, is if you are watching the show, make sure you check out the podcast on the show, which is hosted by the actor who has voiced the lead in the game. It's just beautiful. It's one of the best deep dives into every episode that I've had, that I've listened to in recent times around the show. Also, since Succession's coming up, Karis Fisher's back to hosting. Karis Fisher's back to hosting, the podcast as well. So I think HBO, what we don't talk about enough is the podcast they do around their shows. And they're all like great quality conversations because they don't just go fluff and just like basic questions. They go deep into stuff. For me, the last episode is just like, it hits hard also. And there's no like spoiler in this sense, but there is an actor who plays the mother of Ellie, which is the Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, the Bella Ramsey character. The actor who plays her mother is actually the actor who voiced her in the game. And they talk about how you technically are the mother of this character because you made this character what it is. And I thought that was just beautiful. Like some of those conversations about these things are just like, it's not a spoiler. Everybody knows she's the actor, but just watch the show.
Also, Pedro Pascal looks like Jimmy Shergill, guys. Jimmy Shergill is his name? Yeah. Did you see that meme?
I saw that meme.
That I posted?
No,
Identical. No,
but it's such a great show. Such a great
show.
I
haven't
it hits
seen
really
it.
hard.
I'm not going to watch it.
It hits hard, but you should definitely watch it. Also,
and with that,
I'm hitting the homeland. I'm hitting the homeland this week. I'm going to make my 7-month-old son meet his 90-year-old great-grandmother in the next few days. So it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, we're taking a trip back home.
Nice. Wow, yes. So cute.
Yes.
We will catch all the content on your Instagram handle.
Yes, maybe not. I realized that off late I don't put as much content of my kids out there. I just realized I'm going to let them make that choice when they're older.
Wow, lovely. Appreciate the depth. However, you're still posting a lot of shirtless pictures. Varun?
Always will. Topless and shirtless, all coming up. Midlife crisis is in full swing.
Ethical company. What is it called? ECA. Ethical Company Partners.
Ethical Private Equity.
Ethical Private Equity. Yes. CEO.
What's your name?
हमारी company में. Go Mr. DD.
Yes.
अच्छा, okay.
But
bye.
have a good week, guys. And we shall see you next week. Toodles.
Have fun. Bye.